Hey guys, Michael back here. It's the first time I've sat down here in the barn and talked to this goofy cell phone of mine in 2021, but I did want to get things sort of started here. I mentioned the other day that there's just not a whole lot going on around here, and I really just sort of questioned what I should even be doing. So I thought about something I'm going to do is I want to tell a little bit about myself. And like I said, this is more just to document my life. And some of you may enjoy some of these stories, and some of you skip on over and come back when I start talking about gardening again. That's fine too. But I did just want to talk about myself and sort of how I got to where I am today. And I mentioned the other day about my faith, and the story of John 3:16, the verse of John 3:16, and I believe the hand of God has been upon me since I was a child, and has guided me to where I'm at. There's no explanation to some of these things that's happened in my life other than the hand of God. And so, anyway, I do want to just share a little bit about my story, about where I come from and how I got over here to Southeast Arkansas. So I grew up in a very small town, not a very small town, a small town in South Arkansas. It's called Camden, in Ouachita County on the Ouachita River. And when I was born up until probably 8 or 9 years old, we lived in town. We lived in Camden. And my dad, he had lived in town there in Camden, and he'd graduated from Camden, and his parents lived just right down the road, and so we were always going to see them. And then my mom's family, she was from about 10, 15 miles outside of Camden in the country, and her parents still lived there. And so both grandparents, it was just sort of interesting, both of my grandparents, they lived in the same house that my parents grew up in, and so we would always go back and visit those places. Growing up in town, we were always going to either or grandparents. We spent a lot of time with our grandparents, and visiting the grandparents out in the country, and also the grandparents there in town, just across town, just a mile or two. It wasn't that far between the two houses, but it was myself and my parents. Then I have a younger sister who's 3 years younger than me. And we just, things were, I don't remember things being tough, but things were very simple, when I look back upon them and the raising that I had. We played in the yard a whole lot. I remember our backyard. My dad, he built his little clubhouse back there, and we played in the clubhouse a lot, me and my sister, and had some friends, come over from time to time. And we stayed just right there. We would maybe go walk with mom or my grandma or something around the neighborhood or something like that. Or we'd ride our bikes. But that was our childhood, and just loved that. And then when I was, like I said, about 8 or 9, I think it was 8 or 9, we moved from town out into the country where my mom was raised. And we actually moved into her grandparents' old house, which was a really old wooden house that we'd had to do a whole bunch of remodeling on and stuff too. But we moved in this little house. We was actually renting it from my great uncle. And we lived there, and we were maybe a mile from my mom's parents. They just lived right down the road. We were living in the house that my grandpa, he grew up in, and that was that. And so this house, it was the old family farm is what it was. And my great uncle that we rented from, he had a cattle farm all around it. And so we had acreage there. We had that we could go explore on in his cow pastures and stuff. There was a cow pond behind the house that we'd go fishing in, stuff like that. And then the fence was just sort of butted up around the house. They're pretty close where the cows were at. But on the fence inside the yard, my grandpa, he built me just this little garden bed. It was 3 foot wide by, I'm guessing, 20 foot long. It wasn't real large. And so that was my first garden, was right there. Now, growing up, he always had a garden. And we would go spend time in the garden with him. But he planted that little garden for me there and had a couple. I remember having a couple of cherry tomatoes, some squash, maybe some cucumbers that grew up on the fence. It wasn't a whole lot that we had there, but I just remember we would just go pick gobs and gobs of those cherry tomatoes, and we had an old outside refrigerator there behind the house that we would, it was plugged in there and cool, and we would just, when we picked cherry tomatoes, we'd toss them in there. And I'd always be going out there in the summertime just getting those cherry tomatoes out of the refrigerator and snacking on them. That was just a good part of my childhood there on that place. And you know, we grew more into a country boy, I guess, and we were always playing in the mud and there around the place, and spent more time with my mom's parents probably then, just because they were right down the road. But we were always going to see my dad's parents in town, and doing a lot with them too. My childhood, like I said, I was just a country boy. We hunted, fished a lot, and that was all I did. I didn't do much sports. I mean, if you ever notice these videos, I'm a pretty short guy. Sports was not my thing, and I quickly learned that. I think I played t-ball and maybe 1 or 2 levels of baseball there as a kid, but I quickly learned that baseball and sports were not my thing, and I was more than happy just to go hunting or fishing with my dad and grandparents. So that's what we did a whole lot. Like I said, we had the little garden there. My grandpa, he had a big garden, and that was a good part of my early childhood that I remember. So, like I said, I'm just going to sort of watch the time on these. I don't want them to get too long because it gets boring. But I'm going to go, on my next video, I'm going to talk about, we moved from that house. We lived there for about 2 years, and then we moved right down the road. And I'm going to talk about that on my next video. But I really appreciate you guys if y'all do stop by and watch this video. Like I said, I'm just sort of trying to fill up a little time here, and but also document what I can remember about some childhood stories. And but I'm going to try to find some pictures. Mom has most of my pictures, and like I said, in Camden, it's about 70 miles away. I just don't have a whole lot of them here from that, but I'm going to see what I can find from some of those times, and if I have any that look interesting, I will share those with you on my next video. But I really appreciate you guys watching. Leave me a comment if you stop by, and I'll catch you on the next video. Goodbye.